On the syllabus, where we are right now is the after lunch workout session. We were going to break into groups again. Hopefully during lunch, some of you got a chance to at least discuss course outcomes and associated learning objectives. And maybe some of you have actually got a little bit further to talk about efforts, activities, and assignments and things like that. So we really have a choice right now. Do we want to discuss what you did during lunch and have a big open group, working session, or would you rather just have a real quick overview of lunch, of your lunch activity, and then break into groups again to work on learning objectives, or just combine the two of them right now and have a big open?
We're pretty much ready.
Okay. Oh, good. Good. All right. And so then.
Pretty much ready.
Okay. And the Florida group, we're going to rejoin us. So I've enabled their speaking back and forth. We'll probably see when they come back online. They shut down for a little bit. But Rudy and Mabel were actually together, and so they were forming a group on their own, and we're pretty excited about. So we'll see if we can make them a presenter, when they come back, and then they can share with us what they've done. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Grace is going to put it.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to use this flash drive right here, you can put whatever you have. If you did type something in. Okay. Good. And then we'll take volunteers for who wants to go first. You want to go first? Okay, we could do that. Yeah. I'll go over this.
Where are the documents?
Okay, so this is the blank. Yep, you can go that. And then your document, you have key issues, and we'll let it go. Okay? And then I find it works well if you use that view to make it bigger.
Okay. Okay, first we'll do this one. And then we do, all right. Good enough?
Good, good.
Okay. All right. Thought no one else would volunteer, so I go ahead here. And so we were letters to the editor, and so a few key issues came up in the discussion that seemed to be a little different than some of the general discussion that we'd had before. And a couple of them, so what we envision is a student reads a paper and gets upset about it and comes to one of the faculty and says, this really upsets me. Somebody should do something about this. And so we say, well, we have an elective, letters to the editor. You can write a letter to the editor with me. We can do it together. And so you sign up for this course, and et cetera. And we'll get into the details. So we saw it as not, 6 students was talked about before. We thought it would really need to be 1 to 3 students probably would be generally the way it would work. So what does that mean? And we talked about tuition, and we discussed that, yes, it should probably be tuition, that they'd pay tuition for this as a lab course, and we'll get into the specifics. The faculty payment issue then came up, and so I guess there's a mechanism in the basic sciences where a faculty member is paid per student credit hour. So there's a mechanism where if there's only 1 student, the faculty member gets paid at a lesser level than if it's reaches the critical mass for the regular payment to kick in. So apparently there is that mechanism. We thought the course would be mostly online and some face-to-face. So it's probably meet once or twice together and then give them the syllabus, discuss what needs to be done, and give them the materials that they need to do, and then that they need to read, and then they would be working on their paper online with the professor. So there wouldn't need to be a specific time, Wednesdays at 3 p.m. or something like that. So they'd get the materials on the letter to the editor. Then each letter to the editor, so the course would be, there's a set of materials that the student needs to go through to understand letters to the editor these days, how they're written, how they're generally structured, some instructions to authors from key journals, and then they write a letter to the editor to this journal, and that would be half a credit. And that they could register anytime during weeks 1 to 8, because they might read this paper in the 3rd week of the class. That's okay. They can register, and as long as they put in the work during the semester, that would be all right. So that's how that discussion went. And then we started working on the syllabus. And so we thought it's a laboratory course. 15 clock hours approximately would be half a credit. The prerequisites would be basically phase 3 students only. The competencies would be critical appraisal of the literature and written communication. I know there's some specific ones we need to choose, and we didn't have the list in front of us. The general course description is just a cut and paste of this, so that would need to be tweaked significantly. But the course objectives are what we spent most of our time on. So the student will critically appraise a professionally relevant, peer-reviewed, and indexed paper and write a referenced letter to the editor. The original paper must be approved by the instructor. The critical appraisal and letter to the editor must meet the approval of the instructor based on the rubrics provided to the student. So we had some discussion on what should be in the objectives and what should be in other discussion, but this is kind of what we ended up with. And that's where we are. So, don't know that. So, we discuss now. We'll go to the next. I guess we have questions on that.
Right, is the intention to submit the letter?
Yes, the intention would be to submit the letter for publication, but we talked about we can't require that it be published, but that's but that would be, yes.
How would you address authorship? Just the students, or?
No, authorship would address, I think it should be co-authorship by the students.
Hey, our topic was on an elective that would combine some construction of a bet, some EVP principles, and then get the student to pull together pharmacology, nutrition, and maybe some botanical knowledge that they've got in a core curriculum. So like an elective that a 8th, 9th, or 10th try student would be eligible for. And we thought about high impact, and we thought about nutrient drug interactions primarily as a focus. We didn't have the syllabus template, at least that I saw, so we just put the information we wanted up on here. The first question we asked was, how do we differentiate this from core curriculum? Because, regardless of how well we're doing it, they're supposed to have some expertise in drug nutrient or drug interactions before they get out of here. They're supposed to know more than your typical allopathic physician. So we thought looking at multi-drug regimens, targeting maybe more of the geriatric population and pulling together those different biochemical therapeutics would be a good way to do it. So let me see if this will full size anymore. A little bit.
Go up to view and attachment and increase screen.
That's all we need. That's a little better. So we thought for something this complex, maybe 2 hours a week would be good. 30 hours clock hours total and 2 credits. So no lab per se, just classroom time. It'd be about applying at least the competency, applying basic science knowledge to diagnosis, treatment, etc. So as a general course description or goal, we said building on previously acquired knowledge in botanical medicine, pharmacology, and clinical nutrition, students will learn to identify those nutrients which are depleted by single drug or multi-drug regimens. Students will understand the clinical consequences of these nutrient depletions. And so to get more specific about it, we came up with these objectives. And we, by the time we got to the dessert course, we were able to, we had enough catecholamines going, we could add a few details, so these got a little better over lunch. Upon completion of this course, you'll be able to, for a given patient typology, analyze a multi-drug regimen to determine the possible nutrient depletion. So if we gave them a 50-year-old male on Lipitor and no other current drugs, determine nutrient depletions. Or a patient on 6 drugs, and as the course went on, we hit them up with more complex situations, polypharmacy. For a given clinical situation, construct a bet for drug nutrient depletion in treated either drug or multi-drug regimen, which could be really challenging versus the untreated population. So we posed the question, could you do a bet this way where it's almost a negative, like if for a population with this, is there a different outcome in the sense of they're missing folic acid versus patients naive to this? I think if you were clear in what you were saying, you could identify the effects of the most common polypharmacy regimens in the geriatric population, create an alternative prescription regimen or nutritional plan to mitigate the depletion, and then demonstrate competent use of an interaction database for a moderately complex clinical situation. So in other words, the student has natural standard open, and we give, not a really easy case, but not something that's postgraduate medicine level, and see if they can get in the cockpit and use the interactions checker and actually pull it off like they would in clinic with limited time. So first hour of the class would be lecture, and then after break, they'd open their laptops. Everybody would go on natural standard together and or some other interactions database and start itemizing the major interactions. It would almost be like with the instructor leading, helping out, and maybe asking people, to take turns digging for it. So it would be hands-on that way. Evaluation pass-fail, and then the grade is 50-50. So 50% completion of a bet that has a score of over 80. Maybe that's unrealistic, but over 80 in submission to a BETS database. And participation, so active input during the second hour. So there need to be a rubric for that, but if they weren't finding any of these things in the interaction checkers and their friends were doing the work, they lose points there. So that's what we came up with. And that was it. Any questions? A couple of these objectives we could refine a bit. So
we had three textbook references for the Shockley, Stargrove, and the Nurse's Guide. Plus the PDR has the new section on drug-induced nutrition. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Can I interrupt just a little bit, because you mentioned natural standard, and it's good that that you're using that. I think natural standard is great, but I don't know if you all have seen natural standard lately. Let's see. So I go here. Still remembering where everything is moved around because I bookmarked everything after. So I want to go to the Learning Resource Center, databases and journals, and you'll see that they're all listed here as they were before. Natural standard, we can reach it on campus. They're working with us so that we can reach it off campus. But so we want to go to databases. Is Russ still here?
Yeah.
Oh, so you can help me find
Let's go over
the
checkers.
checkers. Okay. So you always have to accept their terms of use. We can, well, how about SSRIs, antidepressants? Okay. Are we going to, okay.
And then I think the best way is to go, go to melatonin and look at the mechanism of action section of that and compare it to the drug. So,
Okay.
you know, I don't always use the checker for this.
Okay.
I do go into the monograph, but that does require more.
Okay. Do you go through through the databases, or what tools?
I go through the databases.
Okay. And then what do you use from there?
Herbs and supplements.
Herbs and supplements. Okay.
I'd actually use the search term for whatever I wanted to.
Okay. Okay. Cinnamon is right here. Let's take
Yeah, that's great.
a good one on cinnamon.
So
And
interactions and mechanism of action there on the left. Because national standards have so much, right there is all different common names and Latin names and, you know, otherwise known as, and students get really confused with some of that. So I do focus on those two specific areas.
Yeah.
Sure. Great, actually.
And you'll see down here is evidence tables. And they call it an evidence table versus a best evidence table because they grade it. So they'll have the condition. You'll notice on all the cats and the best, they'll start with the condition or the patient, keyword, study design, how you know, relevant or how new it is, and the author. So these are actually key search terms. They get right down to the bottom line. Is it statistically significant? The quality of study. And this is where they would give it a grade. The magnitude of the benefit, which is always the number needed to treat, so they'll actually get into the statistics here, which is, I think the students are really tentative when it comes to even talking about statistics because they've kind of been removed from applied mathematics for a couple of years. And so it's nice when it's there right in front of them and they don't have to calculate it, even though once you explain to them how to calculate a number needed to treat from these specific pieces of data that are always in it. And they're like, oh, that's pretty easy, because then they remember it. But it's always nice that it's actually in these tables that somebody else has calculated. So these are very useful and skimmable. You can follow the condition across and take a look at that. One of the other things, besides being very useful in education or in practice, is that Natural Standards uses student internships to produce some of these things. And so our representative, our technical representative, our technical support person has been knocking on our door for a couple of years saying, you guys use this a lot. We can tell by the number of clicks into this database. How could it be more useful? And do you have anything to contribute, either faculty or students? So as your students are getting more and more used to using it, they're more and more confident that, oh, I could help make one of these evidence tables or contribute to an evidence table, do a critical appraisal. And Natural Standard is really willing to work with us. They have a whole educational section, and they even have an internship program where students can either go there or do it virtually, you know, with a faculty member here, and could write a best evidence table, could contribute a critical appraisal, maybe one line, for instance, cinnamon and diabetes, you know, or you know, inflammation or something like that, and contribute to that. So, you know, again, opportunities for actually generating knowledge from the perspective here so that you can use it either in education or in practice. So very applied. You know, so that's something that you can look into. They also have scholarships where they will, you know, provide a small stipend for faculty and for students who are taking on a big project. You know, so that's always an opportunity. It's always a little bit of a motivation for students and kind of a reward for the extra effort of faculty too. So I just wanted to point that out to you because there's a lot of opportunity for publication, for contribution, for real knowledge generation and use through natural standards is another one, not just the best bets or not just the CEBM at Oxford. Okay, anything else? Russ, anything you want to say about natural standards?
I have a question. How is it coming up sitting on the home? Like when will we know? What do we do? Is it a password you're working on? Or?
Well, it's IP address recognition, and you can people can subscribe individually for like $90 a year, $99 a year. Yes, and so that's what I said was, well, we already do this, and we're using it for educational value, et cetera, et cetera. And it's what we have to do is establish one of our servers so that we can log on through a link like we do for our online catalog. And so basically what our IT people have to do is partition the server that they use for the online catalog and make a little bit of room. So
that's in the works.
That's in the works. Yeah, it was a little bit put aside when they were doing all the stuff for the website and they were using all that server space and all that network band, and then doing some stuff for the interactive classrooms. And now Katie says and Rachel both say that it's closer on the horizon. And so what we would end up doing is basically going to the NUHS databases page, clicking on a link, probably putting in an ID number and password, and then that gives, yeah, a virtual address. So and we kind of have it already with the library catalog. You use your barcode number on your IDs and then your extension number.
But this one is frustrating connected.
Yes, I know, because it's very, very useful because they have these things that are really at a glance and very well organized. Yeah. So yeah, so that's coming along. We keep asking several times a semester and so it'll happen. I have full confidence that it'll happen soon. And I'm sure Russ will send out an email when it does happen, right, Russ?
Right.
Yeah. Now, if you told them that you wanted to keep your same barcode, then it should still work. But if you didn't know that you should ask for the same barcode, then you've been given a new barcode. But Pat says just give her a call and tell her the barcode number that you want to use, and then the ID. You know, some people it's the last four numbers of the barcode. Some people it's your extension number. Some people it's some other four-digit number. But she can put it in. So if you are home, you try and get into EBSCO, it doesn't open up, send Pat an email or give her a call and she'll adjust it for you. So, yeah. Okay, so who else made a fair dent on some of their stuff? Okay.
Our case studies group. Keep in mind I had to translate our work from Chinese to English, so I had these missing elements here. We wanted to introduce a course, an elective course relative to case studies, an introductory course, in fact. We talked about it. We wanted this course to be an introductory to the whole concept, the idea of case studies for the students going into the clinical experience. And afterwards, we would probably introduce a second course in which they would actually be required in clinic to write case studies. Once they know the essential elements, what a case report or case study is, and I think they would have the ammunition or the equipment to do such. We developed our case relative to the objectives, and we have a course description want to be a 2-credit course, 30 clock hours. Prerequisite requirement is completion of completion of phase 1, because in phase 1 they would have had the courses relevant to the literature of Plato and that sort of thing, at least have the concept, the idea of how to search literature. So that would be very important to have that knowledge background for this particular course. So completion of phase 1 is the prerequisite requirement. And here's our course description. This course introduces concepts and describes to the student how to write case studies. Skills of writing case studies will be discussed. Also, the importance of and the impact of case reports in the scientific literature will be explored. That's our initial run at the course description. Course objectives, of which we have 5. We just developed 5 course objectives. And by the end of this course, the student will be able to define different types of case studies. As you know, there are different types. And if you look at the literature, and so they should be familiar with those types and formats. Number 2, the student will be able to recognize and critique the essential parts of a case study or case report. And thirdly, the student will be able to efficiently access and utilize the literature from scientific databases. Number 4, the student will be able to ethically cite referenced content used in a case report. And 5, and finally, the student will be able to identify in the clinic a case-appropriate case-appropriate study. In other words, when they get into clinic, their broad experience in the clinic, they'll be able to cite, that's a good case, I should write that up. So that's one of our objectives. So they'll be running to their clinician, say, Doc, could you help me write up this case report? I think this is a unique case. It's something that's different. It's not there. It's not in the literature currently, or this will be a different perspective in which this case will be presented. So we have 5 course objectives and recommended text. We thought, because there's not a real good textbook out there, but a lot of papers out there that can be downloaded, and we thought a course pack would be the best approach to presenting material there. Anybody else from the group want to chime in? Something I missed out? Speaking Chinese if you want. But yeah, that's our short word on the page.
I have a question for you with the case study. Do you think there would be an opportunity for students to be like research assistants or with a faculty who might be doing a case study, and they don't have the time, or they might not have the skills to actually do the whole case study all the way through, but they would have the time and they do have the skills since they've been introduced to searching the literature in try 1, and then they do a project in try 2, and then they're doing that, and then they get to try 4, and then they do some other things. So in their clinical years, something interests them. Would there be a mechanism whereby faculty could sort of announce or post, gee, I'm working on a case study, I could use a research assistant to help with the literature search and organization evaluation of the literature, before I write it? Because, when you gave your talk about doing case studies, you mentioned that that's one of the a lot of effort goes into that part as far as even preparing to do it.
Yeah, I guess one of the first questions the student will want to know, will I get credit for it?
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll have to devise, if that's going to happen, we'll have to devise a mechanism in which they will be able to get credit for doing partial work or whatever amount of work they're going to do on the project. So they'll have to be defined first.
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Can I have a suggestion? you know how they have the university credits, the community and outreach?
Oh, yeah.
What you need to do is make the university credits, because that's what it would be viewed as.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the 20 they need, 5 needs to be assisting a faculty in evidence-based activities.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That,
Yeah.
and I trust me, I have to provide this communication, give you another extra communication if you research from me, and that they need something or they won't do it. And that would work.
Yeah, that'd be
It's already in place.
that'd be a good way, but you still have to define exactly how many hours they would dedicate to a particular project. So that can't be open. Can't be open-ended. So, yeah, I'm sure for university credit.
1 hour, 1 credit.
Okay.
So a lot of them.
Supervised and non-supervised or whatever. But usually that falls in the realm of your control. You can.
Not the university credit. Ones fall under my control are the outreach credits. They already have a university credit by the time they get to me. So I'm thinking advanced. I have no problem getting the search done to me because I can hold the new patient's assignment over their head. But if, let's say, Dr. Appleyard would like some help and my interns have better experience in doing it, if they knew they still needed university credits that are EBP quality credits, you could come to Clinic or call one of us and say, I need an experienced researcher, try one of us to try it, and I'm having to teach them. This could be the answer to it. It is a dream to have them get my business stuff I printed out, and then they have to go with it because that's to do what they have to do.
Yeah, I've got search terms in the journal.
Yeah.
And we've got a whole bunch of, I'm just
That's
saying.
a great idea.
I think the people in Clinic are better at it, I would imagine, than the third time.
Right.
Yeah, that would be applicable to someone in clinic, but we're talking about if there are students in the lower levels, like first try, second try, third try, you have to have the criteria a little bit more specific.
So that they know what they're doing.
Right.
And to comply with crediting and all that sort of thing. We'll have to keep that in mind.
Along that line of assistance with literature searches, and this might be applicable. I mean, you might be able to put something in. How, do students come to you now and say, can you help me with this? I have to do a bet, or I'm doing a journal club, or do you mostly find out after the fact and, that you could have contributed? Is there a way to get the librarians engaged a little bit more without, without having the whole burden fall on you guys to actually do the searching?
Right. Most of my interaction with the students on site is going to the grand round. The journal club students, really, I guess, are just kicking the first start where they can find out.
Yeah. The statistics show that I think it's 95 or 98% or something of the articles that are presented in Journal Club are open access full text, free full text. So.
I forgot to mention that one other thing in the competencies, and this is specifically the CCE competencies, but I didn't have a list of our competencies in our head, but this would fall under the category of information and technology literacy, and secondly, intellectual and professional development. Those are the 2 CCE specific competencies. Anybody want to do something like that? Easily met.
Good. All right, do we have another group who's willing to share what you discussed at lunch, or would like contributions on making? We've got letters to the editor, bets, clinical bets, case study. Do we have anybody sitting at the table for the independent research study?
We did. We talked about it. It was rather loose. What we talked about basically was prerequisite was 8 to try and bond.
Okay.
And the competencies starting the course was to be able to provide an appraisal of the literature, a critical appraisal of the literature, be able to do a literature search. Some of the general descriptions of the course was to be able to determine what an interesting topic is, or discover a gap in the literature, and navigate your way through the IRB, discover faculty and resources on campus for assistance, such as the research department, the library, experts on campus in that topic. And the objectives of the course was the students will be able to do a literature search, do a critique. We talked again about writing objectives. And again, it was kind of loose, but it was the idea that we discussed also a lot of things. One of them was to break this up into two parts, so that the first we get through the didactics of it. The second part of the course would be to be able to write an abstract, get something that's publishable, and of course, then the goal of the course would be to publish in a journal, and that was discussed. Okay.
I would, one comment, I would remove the 8th trimester requirement. I'd like to see something like this at our institution, but we could probably count them on our fingers, but we do have students who come in working their way through the lower trimesters who have an interest and some background and would like to get involved in some kind of a research activity. You know, that's very general, but and right now I don't have anything. I can't pay them. I don't have a budget.
Right.
A few of us would. Oftentimes it would start with doing some literature work, and then things evolve. But if there was a credit mechanism for a student who is motivated and asked, and again, it's very few, but the number is not zero of students, even in first and second try, who've come and said they, you know, is there anything they can get involved with? And you know, so I mean, I'd send them to go see Dr. Kramer and find out what's happening in the research department. But for the rest of us, we don't have something at hand right now that we can offer other than, okay, you want to just do it out of your self-interest, or I could sign off on a few university hours, but that's limited.
I have two comments. One, what point in their education, at what trimester, have the students already had the courses required to make an independent research project viable? Because it would be too much to teach everything in a 2-hour-a-week course.
Right.
So they would have had to have, you know, Dr. Cameron's course already. And so at what point, that's why we looked at I wasn't sure exactly at what point, but I thought once they entered clinic, that would be a little more apropos. But so that was one thing.
I'd call it a prerequisite to be eligible to get it, perhaps. I mean, again, it's just because I you know, once or twice a year, I'll have a student come to me and they did undergraduate research. You know, they have some working experience in an academic environment, and they would like to continue it. But I mean, I agree. In a lot of other instances, you say, well, we need to bring you up to speed first, and then that would be waiting until they progress through enough of the curriculum. So, you know,
and I think the students that come here that have done research in undergraduate, you know, we have students who come here with fantastic backgrounds.
Right.
You know, maybe the prerequisite could be waived in cases like that. And then the other thing we were talking about in terms of a reward mechanism was, of course, authorship. Get their name on a published paper and get their name before they graduate in a referee journal or some other, you know, vehicle. And that in terms of credit is very important. You know, college service credit, that type of thing is very important. But I think the prestige of having your name on a publication would also go a long way into getting cooperation.
I think it's a great idea, and I like the idea of letting lower trimester people get involved. And I think if you had it like very open so that they don't have to go all the way from step A to step Z in the course, but if they just did a literature search for the instructor, you know, wherever that project is, and they spend 2 hours a week helping the instructor with wherever that project is, and then they could get credit for that. I think that would be more realistic and more helpful too.
because it could take several years to get to the publication stage on a new project, and they could retake the class too. I think would be important. So then somebody like Bob could have someone work with him for 3-4 semesters and take it all the way through. So.
That's correct. One of the things that came to mind was in the Diplomate in Sports program. That's a 3-year program. There's a number of requirements. You know, you have to do, so many hours on the field. You have to pass written and practical exams. And one of the requirements is you have to write a paper and submit it. Has to be accepted for publication. That requirement is the reason why probably 80% of the people who fulfilled every other requirement to get a diplomate does not have a diplomate. It's the writing part of it and the publication part of it. So I thought this was an interesting, topic that we chose, but it is difficult. It's difficult to come together, and I don't know why it's so hard to write, but that's what keeps most people from getting a diplomate. Just throw that out there.
You mentioned the Institutional Review Board, and we actually have Judy Poshis here, so maybe she can take us through a quick view of some of the resources that are available, even just in making students or even faculty aware. But all the Institutional Review Board forms, the manual for the Institutional Review Board, the policies and guidelines are all online. And when I worked with the mentored research students, now granted they had a whole semester set aside, and once they were picked, this is for the mentored research program with UIC. And once they were selected, they spent at least one semester preparing for their semester. We found that was very necessary so that they actually felt that they got something done instead of just getting slammed all at once for 16 weeks and then we're done. So we spread it out over a couple of semesters. And so they were paid as research assistants, either from work study or from the grant for the first semester, and they would spend from 1 to 5 hours a week preparing it. It was real individualistic, depending on their background, and that's a key point that Bob and Manny pointed out. Depending on what their background is, they're more or less experienced or they're more or less prepared to actually do some research. And so that's very necessary. But one of the things that I could do was put them through the NIH training for human research, and that would bring them up to a certain level, and then we would review the Internal Review Board guidelines and procedures, blue book, and that would bring them to another level where they'd be more familiar with the research process, because it's very applied. It's very obvious that after you go through some of this training, read through some of these documents, why it's necessary to have this specific training or look at these certain aspects of a project, make a hypothesis, look at the risks, and the information for the Internal Review Board, as if you wanted to pose the project, is all right here online, very, very well laid out. So very often I would say, okay, you're going to spend 6 hours doing the NIH training, even though they probably didn't need 6 hours for the most part. And then we're going to spend 15 hours really going through the research project in a process and using the IRB guidelines and documents so that it's very applied for them, because they were going into a situation where everything was going to be applied right away. When they got to UIC, the UIC professors expected them to be at a certain level. And we learned that quickly after the first student went, and there was an imbalance in expectations. And so that was one of the ways that we balanced the expectations and got them up to a good playing level very, very quickly. So I just wanted to point that out, that even for your own information and for your own review and education, these documents that are on here are really excellent. They're really, really a really great resource. And you could even ask interns who might be interested to review this content so they know what they're getting before they try and eat the elephant. So that's really important. One of the other things with the MRP students, the mentor research students who went through, they got variable amounts of credits depending on what their project was going to be. So their mentor and they would sit down and we go through possibilities and what they had time for, what their interests were, where their level of expertise was. And then we tailor a project that could be where they could get some gratification after 15 weeks of work. One of the things that the students did was present a poster every spring in April. The UIC, School of Public Health, hosts Student Research Day. And the med school students and the residents will participate, and anybody who's involved in research will display the posters. And because our students were at UIC and taking courses, they could use the UIC support mechanisms for actually making the posters, although we did help them with, okay, this is how you write an abstract, and a lot of editing in that from our side. But that's still an open opportunity for any of our students. The UIC faculty was very impressed with our students and learned a lot from the students. And the person who's in charge of that, because we didn't have an MRP actually going through, so we didn't display, emailed me and said, don't you have a student who can tell us about a project? And then I got another email from the assistant dean of the environmental and occupational sciences, who runs the, it's like a seminar on Wednesday morning. And we did have one student who elected to actually pay tuition for an independent research elective because he wanted to attend there. He had heard from one of the mentored research students what a great experience it was, and so he said, could I take that for half a credit and attend that? He gave a case presentation, and then he contributed to the case, and they were very impressed. So she called and she said, do you have any other students who are interested in participating? We won't even charge them tuition or anything. The UIC didn't charge them tuition, and UHS charged them tuition. So you do have students who are willing to pay tuition for independent research. It's not much, as you said, it might be one person at a time. And you got a connection over at UIC. One of the questions that UIC sent back to us when we proposed the coordinated GCMPH program is, do you have a contingent of faculty who would be interested in collaborating with the UIC faculty so that their students, who are UIC students not enrolled here, could do fieldwork and capstone projects at national or with national faculty on CAM-related either research or clinical products. And then again, we were invited to, any of our students would be invited to display a research poster. And there are actually, I think, 3 prizes, first, second, and third prize. Is that right, Geraldine? Yeah, for people who do, students who do a really good job on their posters present. So it's a good opportunity for students to actually see something done from their research. And as a student research day, it can be little small pieces. So there are people who present, I did a literature search and here's what I found, so here's the hypothesis I proposed, or a pilot study, things like that, survey. So we can always use that partnership mechanism as a way to really help a course like this for both sides. Anybody else have anything to say about the independent research study? So any resources that you might need either to do a research on your own or to mentor students in research? It does take a lot of time, and it takes more time than you really think. But you know, when the students really get as far as being able to present a poster, and Dana Manigan actually got her project to the point where she presented at APHA, American Public Health Association, for a national, international meeting, and her abstract was selected as a presentation. She presented it, she was very nervous, but she did a great job, and she got a lot of accolades for that. They were very nice. All right. What are the other ones that we have left? Enable. Okay. 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 All right. So, we got that. So is there another group that we haven't heard from? Letters to the editor. I think we've got them all, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, basic sciences. You weren't in the group. What are the issues really with doing an elective at the basic science level or basic science topic?
You know, right now my view is very practical, and students are so overwhelmed with the core curriculum. The majority. I mean, again, we've got, you know, and that I have to remember we have some students on the opposite side who are really thriving in it. But of course, you know, I'm a basic science educator in a medical curriculum, so I know that I'm the evil one that everybody has to pass through to get to do what they really want to do. I understand that. And so it's more of collaborating with people in the clinical realm, mm-hmm. but using Dr. Giles, you know, who's always emphasized, well, mechanism is the higher level critical learning starting out, which is to take a clinically relevant, pertinent topic, but look at it not from the actual, not necessarily, you know, what are you going to do with this patient, but look at it more from the basic science perspective, whether it's diagnostic, therapeutic, assessment mm-hmm. at that level, or pathophysiology, whatever the interest might be. So just, I mean, pure basic sciences, you know, that's the core, you know, that's the foundation that you can't go into the scientifically accessible evidence literature until you have that core foundation in place. So right. That's what we do. But it would be interacting with the clinical side, but looking at a clinically based problem, but looking at it from a basic science mechanistic mm-hmm. point of view. Greater understanding, wanting to understand mechanism, or simply trying to actually assess the literature on the basic side
yeah.
as evidence for.
Right.
And critically assessing the standard of the scientific evidence that's put forward as evidence for clinical assessment or treatment. But I don't know how I don't know how that would fit into an elective right offhand, other than.
Yeah.
Well, it could be similar to a clinical best evidence table, only just mechanism driven.
Yeah.
Right.
The mechanism behind treatment X, and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Because I know Dr. Johnson said, well, the elective course has to have an audience and a willing list of participants. So I know our students are clamoring for more basic science coursework.
There's just only one requirement.
Yeah.
It's not the.
Yeah.
I think one of the things too is when the students are in the basic sciences, they're still acquiring a lot of the skills. So in some cases, it might be more amenable or more favorable to student learning to have it as a project for a course, but maybe not as an elective. And, you know, you could term it, you know, it has to meet the publishable quality criteria, but again, you don't necessarily require that it be published, you know, at that point.
No, and even what was pointed out, I think talking about the nutrition courses, where you know, I think there has been kind of moving in where you could get into this a little bit, and we can't be too ambitious because most of these students are learning the science at this level for the first time, and it's really hard. And they're certainly not at the point where they have the self-confidence yet that they could do anything more than try to articulate what they were learning in their class. Now to have the self-confidence to just independently apply that to in a new context, that takes a while to develop. So I think as the students are going through trimesters 1 to 4, accumulating this first exposure to it, to push them, even those of us who will occasionally throw in a journal article just because we find something interesting and it's relevant to what we're trying to teach and has some clinical connection, or for me, I happen to find one on hibernating bears that just came out in Science that I thought was really cool, so I threw that in. And that was metabolism and thermoregulation. That's what I was teaching. And but very few students yet are at a point where they'll, partly because they're being drowned by the fire hose of information we're pouring on them, and partly they're not at the point yet where they can read that and really get a lot out of it, because they're still struggling with the basic terminology. The words are becoming familiar, but they don't really understand it yet. So, but at a higher level, as they're moving through their clinical work, and to say, let's go back and address something from the base. Let's go back and look at whether it's anatomical, pharmacologic, pathophysiologic. Let's go back and just look at the basic science underpinning of that. Let's go back and find one of the supporting articles that this came out of that was a basic science one. Let's now learn how to read that critically. I mean, that would be an interesting course, just to actually learn how to critically read through and apply some of the basic knowledge that you had. And you have to have someone motivated to want to do that, but but that, you know, that could be.
Anybody have anything else to contribute about course outcomes or learning objectives, course activities? If we look at the strategic course development diagram, any of the constraints that would make what might be a great idea maybe not feasible or less feasible or less realistic.
Other than time, space, and staff.
Yeah, I know, time, space, and staff, yeah.
Exactly there, but one of the things that floated in the past in terms of activity pursuits around these ideas was creating our own, as a university, creating our own database of best tables or other such things, so that we become, as a university, we become a resource for doing this kind of evaluation of the literature, and not just leaving it to send out to other places to develop other websites, like sending it to the best folks and getting them to start a whole section of doing what we do.
Right.
I mean, and I suppose that might be some way of creating a partnership with them where, you know, we get some recognition for being an active participant. But, so I thought was
kind of closing the loop. We're doing this stuff. How do we get this stuff to come back to and sit with or serve the university? Because we have our clinics and our graduates, and as we do this work, how do we make that easily available to them as the stuff gets done?
Right, right.
And having our own, and I'm wondering if there's some way of having elective courses participate in creating or maintaining some sort of distribution system.
Right, right.
The other way of closing the other thing I was thinking of is, as our students do this work, would it be possible to have an elective course where students in the later trimester, in phase 3, can take work that's done in the classroom where students volunteer to have it submitted and critiqued, send it on to this group of older students who then critique those set tables or cat tables or whatever, and the students in the elective do the critiquing of what earlier students are doing in their courses. And as a way of improving those student skills, but getting a lot of activity in terms of analyzing and working and preparing. And you know, one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it to someone else. And I wonder if there'd be a market for having students who'd be interested in looking at what a whole bunch of other people do and critiquing.
Right, right.
And so those were two ideas I thought of in terms of other ways of approaching electives that students might want to participate in. So I don't know if those are pie in the sky kind of things, but
yeah, I think those are good ideas, and it would be interesting to see if you could get it implemented within the institutional system.
Because we're doing all this stuff in the institution, it sounds like we're kind of giving it all away then to other places. We do all the work and promote a lot of work is done here, and then it gets set out and it appears other places.
Right,
it doesn't
right.
appear here.
Yeah, and it supports Manchester being a center of evidence-based medicine or a center of excellence.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe we could do something, you know, connected with our journals or something else where we create our own online.
That's a good point. I mean, we publish 3 journals, right?
Right. We do our own.
Right. Russ is, you know, the celebrity of indexing, you know, for journals and that, for the index chiropractic literature. You index for that database. You know, so we have a lot of expertise that is, you know, sitting resident here. So it would be nice to sort of get that credit or that recognition. I think, like Dr. Renke was saying, to get credit for it, it's a motivator.
Yeah.
Good. Anything else anybody wants to bring up? Well, we're actually on target because it's 2:45, and according to our syllabus and our schedule, at 2:45 we were going to discuss faculty needs and wants for the faculty development program, and any need for teaching support or research support. And one of the primary topics that I would selfishly like to ask you guys is what would you want the faculty development program through to 2012 to be? You know, we have the owls, and the owls are very well attended. The workshop was fantastic. And thank you very much for everybody giving up all this time. But I mean, you know, I'm really impressed by the contributions that everybody has made to looking at the possibilities of electives and adding assignments. What would be the best ways that we could follow up on some of this by scheduling all of the faculty discussion sessions so that groups can get together, faculty can get together and actually finish pounding out a syllabus and talk about assignments and credit and outcomes and objectives and when they can actually teach this and how we would get students involved. I think that's one aspect that we can follow. One path we can follow is actually scheduling time to finish making a syllabus so that you could propose an elective.
Maybe I'll move out a couple of the maybe poll everybody. There's a special topic that we want the most, like the statistics part of doing the critical appraisal might be good for some of us.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like the idea of having a venue where people that are working on either in their class or as an elective can get together and talk about what they're doing and have people give them feedback.
Yeah.
Because getting that feedback is really helpful. And if we had like a working group of people at a place where we could say, all right, everyone wants to volunteer to participate. You set it up and then people can submit and say, here's where I am, to discuss what I'm working on.
Could we set up a regular time or a relatively regular time?
Get an online interactive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be better, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we try to get meetings together, but the best, most attended during the week is to be interactive online discussion groups.
Yeah.
I think.
We could certainly use, everybody's assistance there to, keep people moving along and that kind of stuff.
Right, just like
a
group of us doing it to Fraser.
You can do it.
We're getting very
That's how you get very far very fast.
Yeah.
Correct.
And if everybody helps everyone else out, they're plugging along and around.
Are there times, we thought we had a pretty good thing when we examined a couple of trimesters past, of different activities, and we found a Thursday at noon that there usually wasn't something going on. But it only took like 5 weeks before other people found the same thing, and there were regular meetings scheduled. Are there days that during the noon hour at 8 o'clock in the morning or at 4:30 at night?
Sure.
What?
It has to be noon.
It has to be noon. Yeah, that's whenever we ask that sort of raise, it has to be noon. And
So it's not classes.
yeah.
And noon we have several meetings already scheduled on a regular basis.
On a regular basis, yeah. And then the special meetings are the ones that kind of interfere. I say, again, selfishly interfere with the hours.
Right, with you.
That's right.
Which Thursday is that?
So Senate is the second Thursday.
Political science department meetings are
The third.
first and third.
The first and the third.
Although the third is usually online.
Okay.
The first is live.
You just have once to try the ASGR all Thursday.
Okay.
The second week, first week of class.
So every other fifth Thursday of the month.
Okay.
You can have a meeting.
Well, one of the things that we can do is set aside an hour. We'll label it as an hour, and we'll schedule it as a faculty discussion and work session. And maybe for the next two, we'll pick Thursdays, and I'll send an email around, and at least anybody who's got that time can join in, and we can get a Signet course made for a working group. So, again, we can record what's going on, and people can catch up with the discussions through a recording and things like that. We can facilitate that and get some of these figured out. We're still going to have a couple of invited lectures, some from our own faculty and some from outside faculty. So, I'll be sending emails about that. So, and I was reminded that I try in the subject line to put like Thursday, January 5th, EBT workshop, and some people don't open it up until January 5th. So I had several RSVPs in my mailbox early this morning asking for the webinar link or saying, oh, by the way, I am coming. I just noticed I was supposed to RSVP. So that's fine. We can usually accommodate that. but, you know, anything that I need you to open now, maybe I'll put open this now at the very front. And when you pull it over your calendar, you can change that. You know, for Dr. Kramer, I said, okay, I don't really need you to open it. I'll put FYI at the very beginning, and then you can just archive it. So we'll do things like that. We'll just keep the communication going and schedule in opportunities. And thank you guys very much for dedicating this amount of time to this.
Thank you, Mark.